What is going on, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the top 15 best albums of 1970. And as usual, the things we're going to be grading these records on are going to be how many good songs the record has, how innovative and unique the record was, how is the songwriting, how is the performance of the artist, and how is the production of the record. So with that being said, number 15 on my list is going to be an album by Creedence Clearwater Revival called Cosmo's Factory. And this album has some of their most famous songs like Who'll Stop the Rain, I Heard It Through the Grapevine, Up Around the Bend. So there's lots of great songs on here. There's a couple good blues covers that he does as well. And this is just one of the best Creedence Clearwater Revival records in their discography. So that is why this is going to be number 15. Okay, we're going to keep this rolling with number 14, and that is going to be an album by the Kinks called Lola vs. Power Man. This album has some of their most famous songs on there like Lola and Ape Man. Another one of my favorites is going to be Strangers, and I think a song like that, for example, demonstrates the songwriting ability of this band, and Lola is also one of the greatest songs to come out in this year. So that is why this is going to be number 14 on my list. Number 13 on my list is going to be an album by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young called Deja Vu. This album really demonstrates great songwriting, harmonies, guitar playing, and it's also the first record that was made with Neil Young in this group. So overall, all four of these guys are great musicians, great songwriters, and great vocalists. So that is why this is going to be number 13. Number 12 on my list is going to be an album by the Beatles, actually their last album called Let It Be. And this album has some of their most famous songs like Let It Be and like Get Back. Although my favorite track off this record is actually going to be Two of Us. I think that's a very underrated song. Another one of the best on here is going to be I've Got a Feeling. And this is really when the Beatles were kind of wrapping up and they were just not really getting along at this point. So it's their last record and it's not their best, but it's good enough to make number 12 on my list. Number 11 on my list is going to be the first album that John Lennon put out after the Beatles broke up, and that is going to be Plastic Ono Band. This album has amazing songwriting on it. The only complaint I have is the production. I think the sound and the producing of the record could have been a lot better because some of these songs are kind of choppy and just the guitar tone doesn't sound great. But as far as the songwriting goes, it's spot on. I think one of Lennon's best songs is probably Working Class Hero. I think that's probably the best song on this record. And that song, along with these other ones, just demonstrates how great of a songwriter that John Lennon was. And it was a great start to kick off his solo career. So that's why this is going to be number 11. Number 10 on my list is going to be Morrison Hotel by The Doors. Some of the popular songs off this record are songs like Roadhouse Blues and Peace Frog, although I think there are quite a few underrated ones like Blue Sunday, Land Ho, and Ship of Fools. But overall, the whole record's good. The songwriting is good. Jim Morrison is good. All members of The Doors are good, as with most Doors albums. That is why this is number 10. Number 9 on my list is going to be Moondance by Van Morrison. I think this is one of his best records, if not his best record. And this one has great songwriting, great instrumentation. Van Morrison does a great job with the lyrics, the melodies, the arrangements. Everything on this record is solid. There's at least 5 or 6 super strong songs on this record. That is why this is number 9. Number 8 on my list is going to be American Beauty by the Grateful Dead. I think this is probably their best record. It pretty much features all of them at their best, in my opinion. You have a nice mix of country and folk influences while still having blues and rock influences on this. The songwriting is fantastic. The guitar playing is fantastic. The band as a whole just does a phenomenal job on this record. That is why this is number 8. Number 7 on my list is going to be Neil Young's After the Gold Rush. And this album is great primarily because of Neil Young's songwriting ability. And this is towards the beginning of his career when it was just starting to pick up and really develop. And you just see it in his lyrics, his melodies, the chord progressions. There's not a lot of complexity to Neil Young's songs at this point as far as instrumentation goes, but it's really just about him with his acoustic guitar, and that is why this album is great. Number 6 on my list is going to be Velvet Underground's Loaded. This was their last record with Lou Reed before he went to his solo career. And this album features some of the most powerful songs from that time, like Who Loves the Sun, Sweet Jane, Oh Sweet Nothing. There's lots of great songs on this record. Songwriting is phenomenal. The guitar playing is phenomenal. As with most VU albums, the production is not perfect, but it's definitely a huge step up from their previous records. That is why this is number 6. For number 5 on my list, we have the debut album by Black Sabbath. This album is Most important because of the impact it had on the heavy metal genre and just taking guitar playing and the sound of the guitar to another level in 1970. Because before this, we had bands like Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, but Black Sabbath took it to a different level. And it's not only about the innovation of the record, but it's also about how great the songs are. I believe they wrote all the songs besides for Evil Woman, I think is the only one they did that's a cover. The rest of it, especially a song like Black Sabbath, is pretty much as original as you can get for that time. That is why this is number 5. Number 4 on my list, we are looking at Simon & Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water. I think Paul Simon is probably one of the greatest songwriters of all time, definitely of this decade, but possibly one of the greatest songwriters of all time. I mean, Bridge Over Troubled Water is on this album. The Boxer is on this album. You have catchy ones like Cecilia and El Condor Pasa. So many great songs on this record. Instrumentation is beautiful. Songwriting is beautiful. And that is why this is going to be number 4. Okay, at this point on my list, it's getting very tough to rank them because these top 3 albums are so good. They all could pretty much be number 1. But number 3 is going to have to be the third album by Led Zeppelin. This one has the Immigrant Song, Since I've Been Loving You. Some of my favorites are Out in the Tiles and Tangerine. But this album really took it a step in a different direction because there was a lot more acoustic songs on this record than on the previous 2 Led Zeppelin albums. And so you have acoustic sounds, but you also have the same blues and rock sounds that they had on the previous 2 records. That is why this is number 3. Number 2 on my list is going to be All Things Must Pass by George Harrison. This is, I believe, to be one of the first triple albums that ever came out, especially in rock music at this time. But the reason this is number 2 is primarily because of the songwriting. This is the first chance where we get to see how good of a songwriter George Harrison was, because really in the Beatles, you don't get too much of that. You're lucky to get 1 or 2 songs per album. But this album really opened up. And he wrote some of these songs even while they were recording Beatles albums, and the Beatles turned it down. But, I mean, now when you see him put the album out and you see all these great songs, you see how great of a songwriter he was. And the other thing I really like about this record is the instrumentation and the sound of the record. The way it's produced, the way the instruments and the harmonies are arranged, I think it's better than a lot of other records. So that is why this is number 2. Number 1 on my list is going to be the second album by Black Sabbath, and that is called Paranoid. This is one of my favorite records of all time because I think it's about as solid as you can get. There are no weak points on this record whatsoever. You have 4 band members that are all 10 out of 10 musicians at what they do, and you have the best performances you can possibly get. There are no weak songs. The crazy thing is they actually recorded this record in 1 day. I think it says that they recorded it in like 12 hours. They put everything together. And that includes writing the song Paranoid last minute because that was the only one that they had not had and they were 1 song short. So I think they wrote Paranoid in like 20 minutes and it turned out to be one of their biggest hits. But as far as revolutionizing a genre, Ozzy Osbourne's vocals, the bass playing, the guitar playing, the drums, you can't really beat it. This is as solid as it gets for a record, and so that is why Paranoid is number 1.